Hi, I'm Riane Menardi. Today I'm going to talk about how to modernize a traditional block using nothing but fabric placement and color choice. So to do that, we're going to talk about this quilt block, which is a traditional quilt block called the Old Maids Puzzle. And it's the same exact layout in both of these blocks. And you can tell that I have 2 large half-square triangle units in each corner and 4 small half-square triangle units paired with 4 small squares. And just by the color choice and fabric placement, they're completely different. This one uses a more minimalist aesthetic and establishes the blue as the negative space in the background. And you can clearly tell the elements here in the middle. This one is a more bold interpretation, and it kind of minimizes the negative space and the background fabric and creates more focal points for your eyes to look at. So exact same block, totally different, and today we're going to talk about how to create those at home. So to cut out my pieces, I'm going to use a die cutting machine. And this makes it really easy because all of my units are the exact same size, and I can cut multiple at one time. So I'm going to first place my bottom cutting pad, and then I'm going to place my die on top. Today I'm using a large 6.5-inch half-square triangle unit to cut out my large half-square triangles. I'm going to place my fabric on top of that, and you can see I've folded it, so I have 4 layers of fabric, which is great because we can cut multiple at one time. I'm going to place my second cutting pad on top to create my sandwich, and then I'm going to move to my die cutting machine. I'm going to place the sandwich in the machine, hold it in place, and start to roll it through. Once it kind of catches, I'll put my hand on top and continue cutting, and you can see that we're coming out with these beautiful half-square triangle units ready to go. When it's done, I'll take it out, remove one of the cutting pads, and my half-square triangles just come right out. And since we've cut through 4 layers at one time, I have 8 units that are ready to go. And these are great because we can do a lot with the design of our block without too much prep work and too much cutting. So we can put this aside, save the scraps for later, and then we can start laying out our blocks. So for this, maybe we use 2 of these beautiful orange blocks. I've also cut out some other templates as well. For these, I have already cut out my half-square triangles of a smaller size and sewn them together, and I've already cut out my squares. So I have these 2 pieces ready to go. I'm going to start my block layout. And following the same pattern that we used in the other blocks, we're just going to lay this out like we would do with any other quilt block. And like I said, this is great because you already have all of your pieces the same size ready to go. So once you have your block laid out, we'll move to the machine and sew one of our units together. You want to match up your points that were created by the die and sew just a 1/4 inch from the edge of your piece. Sometimes it's nice to go slow so that you know you're being accurate with these half-square triangles, but it's very easy. So maybe I want to experiment a little bit more with this design, placement, and fabric choice. And I've created a block that looks like this. So again, very simple. We have gray in the negative space. We have our units that are the foreground and the eye-catching pieces of our block. Maybe we want to change this, so instead of the gray being our background fabric, we want the blue to be the background negative space fabric. If we have a few other pieces ready to go, we can just lay them on top, and the block completely changes. And you can see what shapes we are creating if we just add more negative space of a different color. We can also use pieces of different colors to see what it might look like and try out different colors in our block. And from here, it's really fun just to sew things together and start playing. So maybe with this block, we wanted to make our white the foreground space and minimize the colors in the background. We can create more tension and more interest by making less contrast between our foreground and background blocks. And with this block, it's kind of hard to tell what the negative space is. And there's a lot of things for your eye to look at, and you want to keep moving around the block. This block also creates some asymmetry. And you can see that in this segment, I have actually rotated the blocks 90 degrees. So it creates a new shape that is also very interesting. So once you have all of your elements together and you've played with some different fabric choices and color layouts, it's fun to see what they all look like in one quilt. And you can see just by using the exact same block that we started with at the beginning, we have a totally modern, new block layout. That's really exciting. And from here, these are all arranged in the exact same orientation. You can see that our two large half square triangle units are still in the corners like we had them. And the fun can continue when you keep rotating these around and playing with your fabric choices. Okay, so I've cut out some extra triangles and I have some extra block pieces. So let's keep designing and make some partial blocks. So let's go to the machine. If we're making partial blocks, it doesn't really matter the configuration that we make, but we do use the same elements that we were creating before. So in this case, I'm lining up one of my large half square triangle units to my small half square triangle units paired with those squares. And again, I'm just going to sew a nice clean 1/4 inch seam. We can also chain piece these. To use the same technique. So now we have 2 more block units that we can place anywhere in our design. And if we're at the design wall and nothing is quite sewn yet, it's easy to see the possibilities. So here you can see that we create some really interesting pieces just by using partial blocks. So these 2 small blue units kind of meld into this area, and this creates a fun piece of negative shape when paired with this one as well. So we can also keep turning things around. We can rearrange blocks. So maybe on this side, I have too much of this black, and I want to distribute it a little bit more evenly. I can move this here. I can move this here. And again, just looking at all of these fun shapes that are created when you change the fabric placement while still using these modern traditional pieces. So it's important to think about what you want your overall negative space fabric to be. And remember, I've just been rotating these blocks and changing them out as whole blocks, but what you can do also is rotate them on their sides. And you want to pay particular attention to the shapes that are created in these intersections, because maybe you create something completely new and unique. You can also turn them on point to create new shapes. And in this one, we have these beautiful arrows that are kind of coming down and this bow tie in the middle. And again, you can just keep playing. You can also, what you can do is kind of move them apart and imagine what your negative space fabric might be in between. And we can insert a blue here or the orange or the black and imagine what that might look like. So it's important to think about, at this point, maybe what you want your overall negative space fabric to be. And that's exactly what I've done on this quilt behind me. So you can see that the yellow in this quilt is the background fabric. And I've used the same exact shapes, the half square triangles, the squares, and large half square triangles to create a completely unique piece that is based on a traditional design. And in fact, in this one, you can see this large half square triangle block paired with this bow tie, which was very similar to what we were doing on the table. In this, I also wanted to emphasize the negative space by quilting it in the same fashion all across the quilt. So this quilt was quilted with these corn elements and hand quilted in the middle to distinguish between the background space and the foreground space. And that's how easy it is to create a modern block and a modern quilt based on a traditional block.